Hey, good evening. This is Nance, and tonight we're going to get dark. That's what we call it, the dark side of therapy. And tonight we're going to talk about a very dark topic, which is what happens when your licensing board imposes sanctions. So stay tuned. Hey, Nance here. Welcome to the dark side of therapy. And tonight's topic is one that's kind of near and dear to my heart because I've always done this thing where every year I go to my social work website, North Dakota and Minnesota, and I check at the sanctions that have been imposed on social workers just because I try to keep up on what's happening. Now, the Minnesota Board of Social Work used to have it set up where you could search for the violation and they give you the whole picture. They give you the name of the social worker, the license number, what they did, the violation, and then what they have to do to get back in the state's good graces. Well, they don't do that anymore. Now they just give you the social worker, the license, and then again, what the reprimand was, if it was a suspended license, revoked, what have you. Now, the North Dakota Board of Social Work still has the complete package. So when you go and search disciplinary actions there, you're going to get the social worker, the license number, what they did, what the consequence was, and what they have to do to, again, get back in the state's good graces. It's really fascinating to me because Minnesota already has 27 violations in 2022 between revocations and probations and getting your license suspended. So this stuff is happening with some degree of frequency. I don't know what's happening in other states, but in Minnesota, that seems like a high number. So let's talk about what's happened in North Dakota. And there's only been one case this year. I was actually submitted February 8th, 2022, and it was a situation where a social worker had a sexual relationship with the client. Don't know the details, just know that it happened. And that social worker's license is now suspended indefinitely, which means they're not going to practice again. December 1st, 2021, a situation occurred where there was a dual relationship with a social worker and a client. Again, don't know the details. And in this case, it's a 1-year probation this person was given. They still get to work, but they're on probation. What they have to do is take additional CEUs on ethics and ways to have a healthy relationship with a client. November 10th, 2020, substance use on the job. Don't know what it was, don't know if it was alcohol, something heavier, but in this case, 6 months probation, you cannot practice. They also ordered this person to undergo drug and alcohol treatment, and at the end of the treatment, the treating clinician has got to submit a letter on behalf of the social worker letting the board know that they are appropriate to return to work. August 10th, 2020. This is the one I'm most anxious to talk about because it's scary to me. And in this case, it was kind of cryptic language, but this social worker exaggerated the work they did on an activity log. Now, what I take this to mean back from my agency days is you've basically perhaps overbilled. You've submitted more billing than you can account for. And this is a dumb thing to do because it's going to be tracked. Clients can track the remittance they get, and you can track your insurance billing. It's really easy to find out when you've overbilled something. Now, this social worker has had their license revoked. They can't practice anymore because they had a previous violation where they had behaved unethically and with discrimination toward a client. So this person's not going to practice again. That's it. These two violations cost them their career. Now, August 11th, again, 2020, 3 more violations. And these ones I want to focus on for a second because this is possibly the easiest thing to avoid. So these 3 social workers, and every social worker, every 2 years, we have to renew our license at every level, LGSW, LICSW, what have you. And you have to attest to the fact you've gotten the appropriate amount of continuing education credits. Now, if you say that you got them, you better be careful because the board can audit you. And in this case, the social work board audited these 3 social workers. And in every case, they could not provide the necessary documentation. So the board doesn't like that because basically you've lied to them and you said you've gotten the CEUs that you didn't. So in this case, their licenses are suspended until they get the CEUs they need to be brought current, in addition to the continuing education CEUs they need anyway. So I want you to think about this for a second. Every mistake or violation I just talked about is one that can be avoided. These aren't accusations. These are things people did proactively. The sexual relationship, the being high at the job, lying about your CEUs, these are all avoidable. This is very different than if somebody accuses you of something, and that can land you in hot water too, obviously, and it probably happens more than we'd like to admit. But in this case, some of these issues are just based on complete dismissal of the rules. So as you move into the field, please, 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 please don't lie about your CEUs. And if you are struggling with any degree of addiction, get the help you need because you bring it into the job and this is exactly what's going to happen. We have to be so cautious with these things and we have to respect our boards too. So again, I would encourage you to go to your state's Board of Social Work, see what's happening, see what the sanctions are, and learn something. Because I think we can learn by observing what other people have done because we don't want to make the same mistakes. So don't make the same mistakes. Now, I want to jump to a specific case tonight. And this case was actually brought to my attention last year by a supervisee who couldn't believe this actually happened. And I'm not much into court cases. I don't read a whole lot of court documentation, but this one really stuck with me. So back in 2016, an intern at an agency in Minnesota named Matson was working with a client. I believe the name was Expose. And this is a person who had been, I believe, accused and convicted before of making terroristic threats against his daughter's mother. So he had a history. He's sitting with this intern and says he's going to, or at least made a threat against his daughter's social worker. Okay, he's going to do something harmful. Now, most of us trained in social work, psychology, all of the helping fields, were taught that if somebody makes a threat, what gets invoked is something called the Tarasoff Law. And for those of you who don't know, Tarasoff was a therapist in the 70s who, when a client came to his office, said, "I'm going to kill somebody." The therapist, Tarasoff, did not report this. Well, guess what happened? The client went and killed the person they said they were going to kill. And Tarasoff was convicted, never practiced again. So we're all taught to be very mindful when a client identifies somebody by name that they're going to harm. So think about this. This intern, brand new, is sitting there with this information, goes to her clinical supervisor and says, "Look, this guy just made a threat." Supervisor in turn says, "Yes, go ahead and report this." So she did. And Expose was convicted in the Minnesota lower courts of a terroristic threat. But that's not the end of the story. He later challenged this and took it to the Court of Appeals. And the Court of Appeals did something I've never seen before, which basically said that this intern, by virtue of the fact she's not licensed, is not held to the same standard as a licensed mental health professional. So she is not protected when she reports something. Moreover, they found that when she had the client sign the release of information, apparently it was unclear. Now, I wasn't in the courtroom. I haven't seen the release of information. I don't know how clear it was. But here's what I do know. They took it to the Minnesota Supreme Court, and the Minnesota Supreme Court upheld the appellate court's ruling. So here's what that means. This intern basically was accused of violating the Minnesota Data Privacy Act. She broke this client's confidentiality. This person, again, who's making terroristic threats. Now, I don't know what became of her, where her career went, if she kept practicing, or if maybe she wasn't allowed to practice. The thing I find staggering, and I've talked about this to peers too, is the fact you do something in good faith to protect somebody, and it comes back to bite you because the court determined this only protects a licensee. And in some clinical staffings I've been a part of, I've said, what if this keeps happening? And I've had peers reassure me this is not going to happen all the time and courts aren't going to interpret it this way on an ongoing basis. I said, yeah, we'll say that to the person that now maybe can't practice because this is a really big deal. So for you new clinicians out there, those who've just graduated, I'm not sitting here saying don't report if you're an intern. because I still think it's important to report, and maybe that just means that your supervisor needs to be the one doing the reporting, even though that flies in the face of all the logic I've been taught. And maybe at the end of the day, it's just a cautionary tale. But it's something that really struck me and certainly went against the grounds of everything I've been taught, which if you are the experiencer, you are the one that needs to report. Well, in this case, that happened. And again, what a rude wake-up call for this intern. I went ahead and have a PDF at the bottom of the screen so you can click on it, read the case yourself. And please leave some comments. I would love to hear your opinions about this case. And I think what I'd like to do is more and more of these cases that really stand out because I think they are wonderful, wonderful teaching tools. So, word to the wise. When you hold a clinical license, there are expectations. The state says this is how you need to do it. This is how we need to do it. It doesn't take much to get into a lot of trouble. And a lot of that stems from just pure negligence. So don't be negligent. And if you're struggling to get your CEO's going to say, talk to somebody. They'll help you out. And number two, don't assume you're always safe in reporting. Talk to the agency you work for. Talk to your supervisor. I'm a big believer that most things get solved through pure discussion. So don't keep the channels of communication down. Talk about this stuff. So I hope you enjoyed this episode. If you liked it, please hit like. And as always, please subscribe. We have a lot of good content up, and we have a lot more good content on the way. This is Eric Nance signing off for the Dark Side of Therapy.